Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org. Hello again, podcast listeners. This is Dave Hamill, your host, and I have with us today Dr. Norm Kurland of CESJ. Hello, Norm.
Hi, Dave. It's great being with you today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Well, you are the perfect person to have talking about this topic, and that is the top three proposals of the Just Third Way. And you can find out about these different proposals or plans on the CESJ website. And there is a common theme here. It's all about how we can create and sustain equal opportunity for every person to own and control future productive capital. And also, I might add, reduce wealth disparity. And I'm going to get you, Norm, to actually say what these top three proposals are.
Well, there are three proposals for enabling every child, woman, and man in a society, and let's start with the United States, so that they can become owners and not just workers to the extent that they can get a job, or people who are forced to take charity or welfare. The real question is America a good model, beginning in the right way by great thinkers, that would unite every person and give every person an equal opportunity to be an owner? And there's a reason for that. Because power follows property. If you own, you will have independence. You can have freedom, personal freedom, but not just for yourself. The important thing is to be in a world in which everyone has equal opportunity to develop to their fullest extent. And that's why we call the overall concept the just third way, going beyond capitalism, going beyond socialism, something in which the class system is eliminated so that we have a classless society. And I think that's what the founders of this country wanted. Now, the three methods, one would be a total revision of the law that we call the Capital Homestead Act, or some people might call it the Economic Democracy Act, so that everyone would have an equal opportunity to own in the future without taking property away from existing owners. First of all, because they can't take it with them when they die. So we want to make sure of the concept of equal opportunity, not necessarily equal results. So the three major ways of doing it. The first we call the Capital Homestead Act. That would go beyond anything that's been done up to now, and it would affect the money system and the tax system basically, but it would affect the economy. But it would put power, economic power, not into a handful of people or in the government, but rather enabling every citizen to be an owner and accumulate over time. And we can say that can be quite significant. So the first is a general law, which we might have had in the past, full employment. Now we want to have full ownership opportunity. And that's what the Capital Homestead Act is designed to do. And the details you can get from visiting the website. The second is something that we already have in the laws, because we were pioneers of getting the laws back in the 70s, which enable workers in the private sector to become owners. And they've become there are thousands of companies, and there are roughly 8 million workers in this country who become owners. Some without ever putting up a penny out of their savings, which most people don't have, or out of their paychecks. And this is incredible, but this is a new approach which we can describe, but it works. We've enabled, I've had the opportunity to do this for a company called Mid-South Building Supply, in which they bought their company out from one of the wealthiest landowners in the Washington, D.C. area. They never have put up a penny. And 15 of the employees over time, this was done in the 80s, 15 of those employees have accumulated up to $1 million each. So,
Well, that's a
but
lot better than the average worker.
absolutely, it's better than normal pension plans, and we were able to get the laws developed because I was then working as the Washington counsel for Louis Kelso, who invented this concept back in the 50s and did the first ones. But there would be no ESOPs or employee stock ownership plans if we hadn't gotten the law in 1974, which authorized this as a very unique plan where workers could own up to 100% of the shares of their companies and do so out of the future profits. The third thing, you're hearing a lot of talk about the defective infrastructure of America, the highways, etc., bridges, waterways, and there's a need for billions, if not trillions, I should have said trillions of dollars, to modernize our infrastructure. Well, we developed something back in the well, it's about 2008. We were able to get a law passed by one of the houses in the state of Illinois, in one of the poorest and cities in the country, East St. Louis, Illinois. It's a basket case, and we were able to bring together with others because we had a leader there to develop something we call a citizens land development cooperative, in which land for the in city and there was 20 surrounding communities were all part of what was called Metro East. And the law turned whatever laws in the past existed so that government owned the land. The city of St. Louis, with the authorization of the state, this Citizens Land Development Cooperative would own the land, and citizens would now be able to come together, rebuild the city or build a new city there. Bucky Fuller was designed a dome city for East St. Louis back in the 70s, but they were never able to raise the money. But we were able to meet with people from the St. Louis Federal Reserve who have the power to create money and work with local banks so that money could be created, so that development could take place, millions of dollars of cost. Probably it would have gone. It may have been close to $1 billion to build a new city in East St. Louis. Unfortunately, although we got the law through the House of Representatives, it never got passed through the Senate because our leader there, a woman named Yvetta Young, one of the great leaders that I've worked with, she passed away. But in any event, we had NASA power technology people, advanced energy systems, the chief architect, Georgetown University, bringing them a very advanced energy system. all working together, but things never worked out once you lose a leader. In any event, those are things we would want to bring to the people.
Okay. So we've got three main proposals. We've got the Capital Homestead Act, and then we've got a specific kind of ESOP that we call the Leveraged Employee Stock Ownership Plan, and
Right,
that uses the S corporation form of corporate structure, which basically makes the whole corporation more or less owned by the retirement plan of the employees. And as I understand it, when you do that, there's no corporate income tax. So
no
it makes,
corporate income tax under the law, because the only supposed legal owner under the law would be a nonprofit ESOP trust. And everybody has shares in that trust. And when they retire, they are able to get cash for the shares, and the shares continue to remain in the trust, so that an S corp is where it's for partners to come together, and partners are taxed. But if the only partner in this case, it really isn't a partner, but it's an entity under the law, they pay no corporate taxes. So anything going out in corporate taxes would result in added profits to be distributed for the workers.
well, I could see how that would make a large, company more competitive in the marketplace. And the other component to our proposed sort of perfect ESOP would be the justice-based management component, and we can talk about that some more later. But just to review, we've got the Capital Homestead Act, we've got the leveraged ESOP with the S corporation and justice-based management,
Right.
and then we have the Citizens Land Development Co-op or cooperative.
Correct.
So those are the
Correct.
three. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to talk most about the Capital Homestead Act because it is probably the most important,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
it would make the biggest change if it was,
Yes.
incorporated. And also, there are ESOPs. So, that is something that we can point to where widespread ownership is working, and we don't have to push for that as hard as it is taking place. And the Citizens Land Development Co-op is more of a local thing and a regional Federal Reserve type thing.
You could have your super highways. You see, all highways. We were working yesterday to point out how we could improve our highways. The question is, where will the money come from, and how will you pay for the infrastructure, both the building it and repairing and maintaining it, so that you can begin to see regional citizen-owned entities in which there would be a way of determining the use and paying for the uses of it. But the first thing would be to be able to have access to money through the Federal Reserve. It would be no interest money. And because the Federal Reserve could create, once we understand that money is really a social tool, and it's a medium of exchange, and it's very important. It's not part of the physical system. People don't consume money, but it's very, very important for people to understand. The easiest way to understand, it's a yardstick of value. It's a way of measuring what you want to invest in, your inputs, your outtakes, all things that affect the economic process. Money is a lubricant for that process to take place, but it's a form of credit. But it should always be backed, and it's not in today's world. That's one of the reasons we're having trouble with our economy and the economy of the world, is that money is backed by government debt. So rather than productive assets, and the whole idea behind the Just Third Way is to get economic power to the citizens, to every citizen from the time they're born, to be able to accumulate ownership so that they will, even if robots take their jobs or artificial intelligence does more and more of the work, uh, you will have a means by which you can be a consumer through your ownership. It's legitimate today in America for those who own. The top 8 people in the world own more than the bottom 3.5 billion people in the world. So we have to really begin to see that there are positive solutions, and money is the key. So in the Capital Homestead Act, it would tell the Federal Reserve, stop doing what you're now doing, because you're now favoring the few, or you're building government growth in Wall Street, but you're not getting power, the power of money. And this happens to be in the Federal Reserve Act. We're not even changing that power that they have, but they're not using it. So now the Capital Homestead Act would say to the Fed, either use it or we're going to have to get new people leading the Fed. Right now, I think the Fed is trying to determine what interest rates are and so on. But the fact is, we have to have the Capital Homestead Act will straighten that out. It has specific and I think very practical ways of doing what we're doing for the ESOPs for every citizen, which would
Right.
allow every citizen to have roughly, under our estimates, and we're trying to be very conservative, every child, every woman, every man would be able to get about $10,000 under today's rate of growth. And I happen to think that we could grow faster once we enable all citizens to get some income from ownership, as the rich have, without having to take away what the rich now have. As I say,
Right.
we could. So part of the Capital Homestead Act would talk about what happens to existing, the gift laws. We would not tax people's estate. We would tax the recipients. And if they have over, let's say, $500,000 or $1 million, you tax that as a way of encouraging the wealthy to spread it out to all the workers, or all the teachers, or whoever they want to, but spread
Many
it out.
nonprofits or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. For people to do, as a matter of fact, you see, one of the objectives is to enable people, and it's not going to happen overnight. It may take a generation. It may take 2 generations, but eventually you're going to find that many types of work, including politics, will be like the founders were. They weren't paid for developing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, or they came together because they had ownership. They owned property, and so they were free. Well, we want to enable every American and every person in the world, frankly. What's wrong with ownership? We haven't thought of it as a solution for the ordinary person, for every citizen, and it is a fundamental human right. If you go to the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says every person should have the opportunity to become an owner, either personally or together with others. And no country yet has a Capital Homestead Act, or would accomplish what we were trying to do. So that's very important. The other thing is the tax system would be changed, and that is the graduated and progressive income tax comes right out of Marx's Communist Manifesto, where Marx was worried about concentrated ownership, and he was right. It was concentrated, and so he invented the term. He and other socialists invented the term capitalist, or capital or things. So they were very clever with words. They called themselves social, Well, and yet they made it clear no one should be an owner. Private property, Marx made it clear. If you read the Communist Manifesto, Marx made it very clear that private property should be abolished. And one of the things they wanted to do was use a graduated and progressive income tax. We would have a flat rate tax, but we would exempt the incomes of people. Say you could have an exemption of 30,000 for adults and 20,000 for children. So a family of four would have 100,000 until every dollar over 100, whatever the exemption is, they would be paid taxed at the same rate, a single rate, as Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and the rich, because you should be able to tax people on the property that's being protected by government. That's one of the features under the Constitution, is secure the properties of the citizens. So we want to first enable people to acquire it and then be taxed on it over the amount it takes to meet their basic consumption needs. And as I say, at some point you're going to. We've done numbers, for example, that if each person was able to get $10,000 a year under today's growth rates, it's called new capital formation. By the time they're 18, they would have accumulated about $190,000, and they'd be receiving about $18,000 in income, just not from their jobs, but from their ownership. And then by the time they reach 65, where Social Security, most people are looking where they can get maybe $10,000-$12,000. No, they'd be able to get. They would have accumulated under the numbers we put on our website, and you can see the analysis. It was over $600,000 accumulated, and they'd be getting about $88,000 in income.
Right. And just to be specific, you said that the Fed would be sort of reoriented, and how they actually started on the right track because it was set up to provide liquidity to private sector business.
Exactly.
And then because of World War I and some other factors, it turned into a bunch of bureaucrats just creating money out of nothing
for government,
right.
And to pay for war.
In a way that puts everyone into debt. But what we're talking about is creating new
tools, social tools to enable everyone to become an owner and just as the ESOPs work, you would do it now. What about teachers are not getting? They should be getting ownership. How about public people working for the public sector or nonprofit organizations? What about? Why not everyone? Because at some point, if they can earn enough from their capital, and robots are doing the things that people used to do, you might not need as many people in the economic system, but they would have incomes, so the economy can grow faster without inflation. When I was a kid, I tell people it was 25 cents an hour was the minimum wage. And my first job, it was something, I think it was 40 cents an hour. Well, now, whatever it is now, people are saying, let's increase the minimum wage. But all that's going to do is increase prices. But if people get their income from the productive sector, from ownership, then they would be consumers. And many of them could go, I would think, run for political office and not be paid. professors, and already there are wealthy professors who teach. They get $1 a year just just to meet that form as an employee. But they have their income comes from capital. And why
Right.
not in the future have more and more people doing that? And what's going to happen to the cost of education? It's going to be it's going to be radically reduced from where it is. And I tell people when I started my undergraduate work in Connecticut, it was $125 a year was tuition. And my grandmother would give me $10 more to be able to live on and come home and on weekends,
Yeah,
so
that just goes to show how the value of the dollar has declined and the cost of education has
exactly,
skyrocketed. But I just want to
exactly.
get this like a specific explanation. So right now, the Federal Reserve is loaning money into existence for all kind of things, including um,
But
frivolous
not for
consumers.
private sector. It's basically for government, because what they do is, as government, we have deficits now, and the deficits are enormous. They're roughly remember the number now,
I think
but
it's 60,000 per person.
that's what it is. 66,000. If you go to the debt clock, uh, you'll see it's 66,000 per person. It's 22 trillion in debt.
Yeah, there's got to
How
be a
can that
collapse at
occur?
some point.
Because we're not taxing. We're going into deficits each year
Yeah, it's
because
just
our tax
insane.
system doesn't cover the cost of government.
Right. So instead of loaning money into existence for government waste and for consumer debt and for speculation on Wall Street, the Capital Homestead Act would restrict the money creation process to only go toward productive business growth. Is that right?
To productive business growth, so that businesses can produce for consumption, so that economic power, we can have a nation of independent citizens who have the same opportunity as the very wealthy have, without, again, we don't have to create enemies. Rather, we just have to have people understand that they have a fundamental right. They may have to study to make sure that what we're talking about makes sense. But I have yet to hear in over 50 years anyone tell me what's wrong with it. And
Right.
if people go
Well,
to
it
our
makes so much
website,
more sense than what we're doing now.
yeah, if people go to our website and look under the articles section, you'll see my exchange with Milton Friedman. He would not tell me why he was opposed to it, because
Right.
and then he would go out and say, what's wrong with greed? Here was a man who was thinking greed is what everything should be. No, it's justice is a virtue, but greed is a vice,
That's
and it's a
true.
bad habit. uh, so we have to begin to inspire people through a system that's more just, so that all citizens recognize it's important to work for the common good, for the dignity of everyone, to do whatever you can. If you want to go into politics. You want to teach, if you want to be an artist, a musician, you can do that, or
But at the
an
same time,
athlete.
if you want to continue, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to run a business and you want to
Sure.
use investment money or whatever, we're not trying to change that.
No,
We're
no, it's going to encourage people who have good ideas for changing the system, for having one that's free of carbon use. You can have one that deals with climate change. We're now working in St. Louis to work with a group that's trying to organize in St. Louis to be a model city. It might be the St. Louis plan. and they're reaching out to academics and to millennials, etc.
Outline how the exact transaction works where the citizen gets the investment voucher from the Federal Reserve and then decides what business to invest in. I just want to, go through a few sentences of that.
Okay.
So that,
Yeah, it's got to be practical. And so you're going to have a very important aspect of the whole thing is risk. You see, and therefore, a lot of people think the only way you can get credit, capital credit, you can get consumer credit, but not capital credit. You must, under present, this is just a fallacy within the business world to think that the only way you can get capital credit is if you already have savings. Well, that automatically excludes most of humanity. Most of humanity live, within, don't have much in the way of savings, nothing at all.
right.
And so the idea that Kelso came up with, a brilliant idea. Well, actually, it was before the founder of Brookings Institution was a man named Harold Moulton, who wrote a book, and you can get it from our website free, The Formation of Capital, in which he pointed out that no capital can be financed on credit repayable with future earnings.
Right.
Oh my God! Now, see, that makes a lot of sense. But then again, what has to be done, and Kelso added this to Moulton's idea, was you got to deal with the issue of collateral. Your bankers are always going to seek collateral because there's risk. Okay, what do you do with risk? Well, there are going to be some risks nobody should get credit for. It's just going to be a failure. But Kelso said insurance. So the insurance industry is capable of determining risk on particular new shares that have been issued by different companies, and they can for most the risk might be 1%. Because they have qualified people, professionals, they have good working relationships with. And you were pointing that out. You need justice-based management, justice-based leadership. We need leaders who don't see themselves as superior to others, but rather they are servant teachers. They see themselves as servants and teachers of those they work with. And if you have that kind of a leader, the workers are inspired, and they too, and the team as a whole will be serving whom? The customers. So if you got a team that's capable of serving the customers with quality, it's going to succeed in the market system. It'll be good. So that's
Right.
something we're trying to encourage, and we're trying to encourage that in the ESOPs. And there are some companies, the ESOPs that have participation in governance, participation in the whole process of working together. You can have everyone taught on how they work together as a team to solve problems in the company so they can be more and more efficient. The more efficient you are, the less the risk of failure. Therefore, the cost of capital credit, you must add a insurance premium that in the case of failure, you can always go to the insurance, and they make the lender, the banks, the local banks, whole for whatever they would lose. But in other words, there's a rational way, a business-like way of justifying new capital formation, which is going to take place at the local banks. But the central bank is there to regulate the commercial banks, and we would add cooperative banks. And any questions that people have in terms of answers to those are available in the books and articles. You'll see that we've had President Reagan was a top supporter of our ideas, and there's a video in our video section where he gives credit to our work. In it was Presidential Task Force on Project Economic Justice to start applying these things in Central America and the Caribbean. The idea of expanding ESOPs. He was really pushing ESOPs. But more than that, he knew that every citizen should be an owner. But you had Senator Russell Long, a leader in the Senate, head of the Finance Committee, who was our real champion up on Capitol Hill. But then Hubert Humphrey said we have to go beyond full employment to full ownership.
Right.
So it isn't a question of either party, but I fail to see leaders in either party now who are prepared for the just third way. So we have to find new leaders, and that's the reason that we're working in places like Louisville, Kentucky, but St. Louis is a place that we think can be in Cleveland, Ohio. We have people there who are working on it. People in Hartford, Connecticut, working on it. But the important thing is we have to get academia teaching the just third way.
That's true. That's true. And just to review, so each one of these three plans is focused on for-profit entities that are owned at a widespread basis by citizens and I guess stakeholders in the process. And it's not like they're charities; they are for-profit, and the shareholders are the people. And everybody works together to, profit from it.
To profit from it, to benefit from profits. Nothing wrong with profits. Kelso developed what he called binary economics. He says there's two ways to be productive. It's not just a wage system, and a lot of people think it's a wage system. Everything is labor. No. You contribute your labor, and you should be rewarded for the value of your labor. Everybody should, and some will be able to contribute more because of their background than others, and the market will reward them. But why not participation in what's replacing human labor in the last 100 years, particularly, And that is the capital. That's right. The technologies that continue to be invented. Some of them are invented in the military for war. Well, how about putting those inventions to work for peace?
Absolutely.
And bringing Americans together and ending the class system where you got a class of rich and a so-called middle class, and then the poor. Why not enable everyone not to have equal results but equal opportunity? If ownership is good for the few, why not being good for everyone?
Yeah, and I think that the few who are successful from hard work and saving money and whatever it is that they say makes them successful would still be, really, in my opinion, not only successful but more successful, because everyone in the world is now their customer. They all have money to spend on their products and services.
Exactly. There are two sides of the economic equation: production and consumption. And if you produce because there are customers, and if there aren't customers, you don't produce. So if in fact people can have income without stealing, without taking it from anyone, well, it just means that your consumption power is greater and enabling you to produce more. And you can produce more in a way that's not going to damage the environment.
That's
that
true.
we have the capabilities.
And these businesses would be dividend paying corporations, and we would get our investment credit from the Federal Reserve every
Right.
year. We would choose which companies to invest in,
Correct.
and once we make that investment, we start getting dividends from those profits every year.
Exactly. And
And
the
that's
corporations, by the way, well, I don't know if I made it clear. The corporations would eliminate corporate taxes if they paid all their profits to the people. In that way, they'd eventually be taxable by all citizens. You see, and so there'd be no corporate tax. But however, if they want to continue to right now, over 50% of the profits are paid out in state and federal corporate taxes, and then growth is taking place to the corporations not paying the dividends out to their shareholders in order to buy back shares, concentrate ownership further. You see, all that would be unnecessary if, in fact, they pay out all their profits in a way in which every citizen in the country can benefit.
right. Yeah, it's a much better process than what we're dealing with now, from the actual money creation all the way through to the taxation,
Right.
people's savings, people's wealth, and the size of government would inherently become smaller and smaller, so the
Exactly.
taxes would become less and less. It's
Exactly. People would not be dependent on government for their money, but government would be dependent on the people. And this will be a healthier relationship between the citizen and government. To be economically dependent on who runs the government, whoever has the power to control government, whether they're rich people or politicians, they're going to that leads you to corruption. And remember that government is our only legitimate monopoly. And if everyone is or most people, let me put it that way, if most people are dependent for jobs and income and welfare from the government, they're not going to become fully human. They're always going to be kept down. And if we believe that everyone should have an opportunity to become fully human, to develop to the extent of their individual potential, no matter what that is, as long as it's positive, that's great. We should be encouraging that. The present system discourages that.
right. So true. So true.
And you
Well,
see, issues of race, for example, if everybody, regardless of their race, whether they were descendants of American slaves or descendants of slave owners, everybody should be treated equally.
that's
And,
true.
and that will
If
be
we
the end of racism,
That's a
because
good point.
everyone will be able to develop to their fullest potential.
That's right. That's right. Well, that is a good word, Norm, and that's a good place to end it. And I hope everyone gained some knowledge about these three plans that we went over. And I encourage anyone to go to the website, cesj.org, to learn more. You can seek out on YouTube. There is a very simple video that we recently made called People and Things. And it's very well produced, and it's poetic and illustrates what we're talking about in just a matter of a couple of minutes. So that's something good to share around.
Two
And
minutes.
yeah, yeah. And there's several PDF type documents that you can download, and presentations that go over all of the details of these plans and further detail. There's also books. There's Capital Homesteading for Every Citizen, which is a book by Norm and Dawn and Mike.
Right.
The people that you hear on this podcast, they wrote the book. Very, very detailed book with a lot of explanations that you can buy or download, for that matter.
Right.
So,
And I think it's important to mention that the Center for Economic and Social Justice, everyone works, has to find another way to earn, because none of us get paid for our work for the
Right.
Center for Economic and Social Justice. And we are in the process of organizing Justice University. So,
Absolutely.
so these ideas can become part of what people learn when they seek higher education. And so teachers could become educated on the Just Third Way as just a part of what you seek to know, to be considered, for yourself to be considered an educated person.
Right. That is essential. We have to educate people. Well, thank you very much for going over all of this stuff today, Norm. I think it was important to have a show where we did so. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, all I can add, Dave, it's good to have you producing this show. And,
well, thank you.
And I'm hoping that people from all over the world will begin to listen to your shows and the people that you have introduced to the world through your Just Third Way podcast.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm flattered to have you as a resource and someone that I can introduce to the public and let them hear all the things that you've done, from meeting with Senator Russell Long to get the ESOP laws passed, to working on President Reagan's task force, to being a civil rights lawyer in Mississippi during the conflicts of the 60s. There is no one else who has a historical, important past as far as empowering people. And I'm glad to know you. So I encourage anyone to go and read about those stories on the website.
Good. Thank you very much, Dave. Again,
thank you, Norm. You have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Okay. Bye. You can join CESJ by going to cesj.org and clicking on participate, and you can become a paying member for $25 per year. And also a student membership is $15 per year, and that qualifies you for discounts on our materials, such as books, which you can buy many of and distribute to your friends and family. And also, if you'd like to participate and comment on the podcast, feel free to call. I have a voicemail set up. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'll play it on the podcast. The number is 678-719-2840. Own or be owned.